Luke had always been an early riser. As the sun cracked through the horizon, he stood at the edge of the landing strip, watching the birds circle in the distance. He could feel the coolness of the early morning air, which was soon to be replaced by the stifling heat of the day. Beside him, Rex, his loyal German shepherd, stood with his ears perked up, scanning the surroundings. The bond they had was unspoken, but understood. They were a team, partners. And for Luke, Rex was more than just a dog. He was family. The helicopter roared to life behind them, its blades cutting through the air as soldiers and handlers prepared for the mission. It was their first real operation together, a rescue mission deep in enemy territory. Luke patted Rex's head. "You ready, buddy?" he whispered. Rex's tail wagged once, the only response needed. As they loaded into the chopper, Luke couldn't help but feel a slight tremor of excitement mixed with nervousness. This mission was risky, but it was necessary. They were going to save lives. He glanced at Rex, knowing the dog would be right there with him every step of the way. The chopper descended into the dense jungle, the canopy below them thick with the sounds of distant animal calls and the rustling of trees. Luke's team was scattered across the clearing, setting up their positions, while Rex moved with silent grace, sniffing the ground for any signs of danger. They'd been tracking a group of insurgents who had taken an American diplomat hostage. The mission was critical, but the danger was palpable. Luke had been briefed on the location of the camp, but the terrain was unforgiving. Rex was already on the move, his nose to the ground, eyes alert. They were getting close. Luke's heart raced as he followed, knowing that any moment could bring a firefight. Suddenly, a series of gunshots rang out and chaos erupted. The enemy had ambushed them. Luke hit the ground, instinctively reaching for Rex. "Stay low, boy," he whispered. Rex was already on it, charging toward the enemy with deadly precision, pinning one of the attackers to the ground. Luke drew his weapon, providing cover as Rex handled the threat. Hours later, the mission was a success. The hostage had been freed, and the insurgents were taken out. But there was one thing that stood out to Luke more than anything: Rex's instinct. The dog had been a silent, invisible force during the operation, taking down enemies without hesitation. As they boarded the chopper to head back to base, Luke leaned down to give Rex a quick pat on the head. "You saved my life today, buddy," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Rex licked his hand in response as though to say, "I know." They had formed a bond that couldn't be broken by words. Luke had always been a man of few words, but Rex understood him better than anyone. Weeks passed since the mission, but the bond between Luke and Rex only grew stronger. They were inseparable. Whether on the battlefield or off, Luke knew that Rex would always be there. Rex was more than just a dog. He was Luke's companion, protector, and friend. Luke found himself talking to Rex more often. Not that the dog could respond, but it was comforting. He'd tell Rex about the mission details, the people he'd met, and even his personal struggles. "Some days I don't know what I'm doing here," Luke confessed one evening as they sat outside the barracks, the stars beginning to twinkle in the sky. "But you make sense of it. You remind me what it means to keep going." Rex, as usual, sat at his feet, his head resting on Luke's lap. It was in those quiet moments that Luke found peace, surrounded by the familiar, steady presence of his dog. The war continued to rage on, and with it came more dangerous missions. Luke found himself growing increasingly tired, his body aching from the constant strain of combat. He couldn't shake the feeling that the war was changing him. One evening, after a particularly brutal mission, Luke sat in his room, staring out the window. Rex lay at his feet, his body still, as if understanding the weight Luke was carrying. Anna, Luke's wife, had tried to reach out to him. She had noticed the changes in him, the way he'd become distant, how his eyes held the weight of something unspeakable. But every time she reached out, Luke pulled away. "It's just the job, Anna," he had said, the words leaving his lips with more bitterness than he intended. "I'm not the same man you married." Anna had tried to hold on, but she could see the changes in him too. The man who once shared his thoughts openly with her was now a stranger. One night, during a particularly intense firefight, Rex took a bullet meant for Luke. The blast sent Rex flying into the dirt, his body crumpling in pain. Luke froze, his heart stopping as he saw his loyal partner lying motionless on the ground. "No!" he shouted, rushing toward Rex. The field medic was already on site, but Luke didn't care. His entire world was focused on Rex. Rex's breathing was shallow, and for a moment, Luke thought he might lose him. The medics worked quickly, stabilizing Rex enough to get him back to the base. Luke refused to leave Rex's side as the doctors worked on the dog. He couldn't lose him. Not like this. Rex had been there for him through every mission, every danger. And now it was his turn to be there for Rex. After weeks of recovery, Rex was back on his feet. But the bond between him and Luke had shifted. The near-death experience had made Luke realize how fragile life was. Every mission could be their last, and the thought of losing Rex was something Luke wasn't willing to entertain. The day they were cleared for active duty again, Luke and Rex were assigned to a high-profile mission. It was a risky one, but Luke knew he had to do it. They were both ready, stronger than ever, their bond unbreakable. The mission took them deep into enemy territory. The plan was simple: get in, complete the objective, and get out. But as the mission progressed, it became clear that things were not as they seemed. The enemy had laid a trap, and Luke and his team were walking straight into it. Gunfire erupted from all sides. Luke ordered his men to take cover, but he was separated from the group. Rex, as always, stayed close by, protecting his partner. The firefight was brutal. Luke found himself in a standoff with an enemy soldier, both of them locked in a deadly dance. But before the soldier could pull the trigger, Rex charged in, taking the bullet that was meant for Luke. The sound of Rex's howl echoed through the field, filling Luke with a deep sense of dread. He rushed to his side, but it was too late. Rex had given everything. He had saved Luke once more. Kneeling beside his fallen partner, Luke felt a wave of grief, unlike anything he had ever known. Rex had been more than a dog. He had been his shadow, his protector. And now, he was gone. Luke cradled Rex's head in his lap, tears blurring his vision. "I'm sorry, buddy," he whispered. "I couldn't save you." The days after Rex's death were a blur for Luke. The grief was overwhelming. But through the pain, he knew one thing: Rex's legacy would live on. Luke took the lessons Rex had taught him, loyalty, bravery, and sacrifice, and channeled them into his next mission. It wasn't easy. Every mission without Rex by his side felt incomplete. But he knew he had to keep going. For Rex. For all the dogs who had served beside their soldiers. Rex's memory lived on in every life he touched, and Luke promised to honor it by continuing the work they had started together. Part 2, Chapters 11 to 20. Luke's life without Rex was never the same. He had lost his best friend, his closest companion. But his work with the dogs wasn't over. He had made a promise to Rex, and he intended to keep it. It wasn't long before Luke found himself with a new partner, Ace, a German shepherd with piercing blue eyes. Ace wasn't Rex. He never would be. But he was loyal, and he had the same drive that Luke needed to continue his work. Their first mission together was a routine one. A simple sweep of a local village to check for insurgents. But the situation escalated quickly. A group of armed men ambushed Luke and his team. Ace sprang into action, just like Rex had done so many times before. The dog darted through the chaos, taking down enemies with precision and speed. Luke found himself in the thick of it, relying on Ace to cover his back. It was a new dynamic, but it felt right. Ace was proving himself, and Luke felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps it wasn't too late to rebuild what had been lost. The missions continued. Luke and Ace formed an unspoken bond, each saving the other time and again. Ace's instincts were uncanny, and Luke found himself trusting the dog more than he ever thought possible. But as the months wore on, Luke knew that he would always be haunted by the memory of Rex. Ace was different, but in many ways, he was the same. Brave, loyal, and fearless. Luke wasn't looking for a replacement, but rather for something to fill the void that Rex had left behind. Luke received a letter one day. It was from Malik, an Afghan translator who had worked with Luke's unit during the war. He had been left behind when the U.S. withdrew, and now he was being hunted by the Taliban. Malik had saved Luke's life on more than one occasion, and Luke knew he had to repay the debt. Without hesitation, he packed his bags, leaving Anna behind once more. Ace would accompany him, of course. He was more than just a dog. He was family now. The journey was treacherous. The snow-capped mountains of Afghanistan were unforgiving. Luke and Ace battled the elements, facing ambushes and danger at every turn. After days of tracking, they finally found Malik hiding in a cave, weak and starving. But he was alive. Luke promised Malik he would get him out. But the Taliban wasn't far behind. They fought their way out of the mountains, with Ace leading the way, sniffing out traps and alerting Luke to danger. The final stretch was the hardest, facing enemy gunfire while trying to protect Malik. But they made it. A rescue chopper swooped in at the last moment, pulling them out of danger. Luke looked at Malik, his eyes filled with gratitude. "We made it," Luke said quietly. Malik nodded, tears in his eyes. "You came back for me." Luke smiled, knowing that he had done what was right. Rex had saved him. Now he had saved someone else. Luke's heroism didn't go unnoticed. The Pentagon called soon after, offering him the Medal of Honor. But Luke wasn't interested in the accolades. He had already received the highest honor a soldier could ask for. Instead, Luke focused on continuing the work he had started with Rex. The Rex Foundation grew, training more service dogs for veterans and first responders. One day, Luke stood at the memorial for fallen soldiers, a statue of Rex towering over him. The work Rex had started would continue, and it was Luke's duty to see it through.